Reptile says no DNA testing from the Carolina Mountains either. Very curious indeed. Tell me they're white without telling me they're white. Well, precisely. I mean, come on, for people who don't know the Carolina Mountains, and they're all up the East Coast, right, Reptile? These mounds, and they're not geologic formations. No geologists have come forward and say this is how these are made. There's no investigation, no genetic investigation. You have, of course, the spear points found in Virginia that are made actually. Now, this is the Smithsonian, the guy who used to be the head of archaeology at the Smithsonian. Now, please, you go research it for yourself. I recall him saying these are spear points that were found in Virginia, and they were found on this piece of property or whatever. They were dug up, and they are not carved in the same way as the spear points from the earliest spear points from the furthest west part of Alaska, where there was a land bridge with the Far East. There was a completely different spear point. Was the spear point in Virginia called Clovis? And anyhow, he said these spear points that are found in Virginia, and I believe they may have found them elsewhere now, are infinitely superior to the ones that are found, the oldest versions of the ones that are found to the furthest points of the West, where there used to be this, was a Bering Strait land bridge or whatever they called it. And then he talked about why they're superior. So he said there's no linkage from going from like the people who came across the land bridge making these inferior spear points to making these superior spear points. There's no step-by-step. It's that these occur in a frame of the archaeological landscape of time, and then they're gone. There's no building up to them. They appear, and they are all over, and then they're gone. And he says, but even more importantly, please check this out for yourself to be sure, to make sure you got it right, that I've got it right. The stone that those particular ones were made from comes from France, or came from France. So this speaks to a completely different hypothesis, and these mounds as well speak to, potentially, a completely different hypothesis and voluminous evidence that the Americas were originally populated by Iberians or Solutreans. They've given them different names, and that these people ceased to be. And of course, that raises the question of, well, where did they go? Well, according to American Indian lore, when they came to these new lands, there were giants with blonde hair that they had to do battle with. Now, this is their lore, and you can check it out for yourself. Again, maybe I'm wrong, so I'm just entertaining you. Do your research. And so then you can speculate about why there aren't any American Indians in the Far East. Like, where did they come from? Why do they look like that? Could it be that far more of these Far East migrants came across the land bridge and then did battle with these blonde giants and won and took sex slaves as the spoils of war, and then genetically altered who they were as a consequence? And then that's why American Indians are not found in the Far East? I'm asking questions. But I was going to say, you know what would be interesting is if, like, we found a Carolina mound that was like, of all the mounds, it was economically the easiest to get to and maybe the easiest to dig at without getting caught, and then go there and start digging like hell before the authorities can get there and stop you. Because I'd be curious about them being burial mounds. replete with weapons and tools and skulls and genetic material. Who would come with me on that expedition? Reptile says, allegedly, the Solutreans were peaceful with superior technology, but as South and Central Americans migrated north, they overtook them with raw numbers. Well, I would push back a little in that I don't believe there has ever been even a claim by anti-whites that human beings originated on their own in Central and South America, but that Asiatics came across a land bridge that connected to Alaska and then came down, what was it, something like 30,000 years later or 10,000 years later maybe. And they came in with massive, infinitely massive numbers. But you can find their lore where they talked about the blonde giants. And you'll even find in these crazy groups where they theorize everything is aliens. They will sometimes use that American Indian lore to say, oh, well, what they were talking about there were aliens. The blonde giants and the blue eyes and all, those were aliens. And then you all remember, I told you all a while back about Peru, right? Do you remember that? Where there was one of these alien studies over those oblong skulls, and they found DNA. And then in the show, I'd probably never get seen again. In the show, they shipped the DNA off to be tested. And the guy had crazy hair, the alien hunter guy. And so he's very excited. And he's like, I'm so excited to hear about the DNA. And so he gets the geneticist, I guess it was, on like a Skype call. And the geneticist says, this is really fascinating. Very fascinating. And especially because you're saying this DNA was taken from Peru. And the time frame of where it was found in Peru. Long before they believed, or it's claimed, that there were white people in the Americas. And the geneticist said, well, we found this much DNA was ruined, so we couldn't see what it was. There was this like 1/100% of DNA that was there, but we couldn't figure out what it was. And then there was this giant chunk of DNA that's very exciting, very titillating. And so the alien hunter said, oh, well, what is it? We need to know. And he said, it's Scottish. And the alien guy looked like somebody had just stolen his puppy. He was like Scotland? And the DNA guy was like, yes, this is fascinating. Scottish DNA. And then the alien, you wouldn't even believe this, how sad this was. And the alien hunter guy then said, but there was like this tiny fraction that is of unknown origin, correct? And he was like, yeah, we couldn't ascertain what that was. And so then the alien guy was like, well, maybe that's the aliens. Yeah, the aliens were white people, some would assert. Those were the white people. But then the thing that was really telling to me, and then I'm going to move on to our main stories here, is that when all this information was coming through, I mean, do y'all remember when Clinton was in office and they found Kennewick Man? Then they immediately, they thought it was a recent crime, and the police went out. They gathered the skull of Kennewick Man. They looked at it. And if you all don't know about the study of skulls and how much they can ascertain about race, sex, age, etc., it is unbelievable. It rivals DNA testing. Check it out for yourself. It's amazing. And they came back and said, this is a 30-some-year-old white man. That was found in Washington State, wasn't it? Washington State. And then the government, Clinton's government came in and said, oh, no. It can't possibly be. Return it to the American. It's obviously an American Indian because of once they dated it, they found out, well, this would be a white man on the west coast of the United States. way before white people were ever supposed to be in the Americas. So how could that be? And so they gave it back. The American Indian tribe did some sort of a ceremony. They buried it. They buried the bones. Supposedly, they buried the bones. And then the Clinton administration, and I didn't follow up on this, but I heard that the Clinton administration, the government, moved boulders over all of this area so that people couldn't go looking for where the remains were. But I suspect that the remains were not interred. Okay, we got a bunch of people saying they would come and join me on the expedition. Victorian Time Traveler says he would totally go on the expedition. Love archaeology. Studied anthropology before I dropped out of college. You're in, man. Who else wants to come? Let's go dig this stuff up. Linda's here. Hello, sister. Great to see you. Let's go dig up our ancestors. Mit is here. It's fascinating stuff to think about. But here's the thing I wanted to tell you. And it's really important because when this information started spilling out, not initially, not a Kennewick man, but then there were other discoveries. And then the guy who was the head of archaeology at the Smithsonian was just like, I'm going to say it. And he says, I have the video somewhere. He said, this is years back. He was like, I know this is very upsetting. And it was crazy to hear scientists talking this way. I know it's very upsetting. I know this is not what people want to hear, but this is the science. This is what it's revealing. And then all of a sudden, all of these magazine articles, tell me if you remember this in the live chat. All of these magazine articles started being written, and there was actually a video done, or more than one, but I can remember one very clearly right now on History Channel, I think it was, that said, who were the first Americans? It doesn't really matter. Because it looked to me like they were trying to triage this information getting out. And they were just hoping, they were thinking, oh my God, it's going to burst out onto the scene. And we have to say that it's not really important anymore who was here first, because we're all just America now. We're all just Canada now. Meanwhile, all along, they've been beating us over the head with, you're not the original ones to these lands. And you need to lower your guard and allow yourselves to be victimized. It's one of the most pernicious and powerful MPs for the white race in North America. Is that you're just this interloper. Now, of course, we know how to defeat that with the MCs we have, because there is no America or Canada without white people anyhow. But if it were to be known widely that the white race, or like if it were proven or known widely that the white race were the first in the Americas, and that then they were genocided by latecomers, whoa, that kind of changes the conversation quite a little bit, doesn't it?